The crystal chandelier above cast harsh light across the conference room as Alicia Hartley felt every pair of eyes burning into her dark skin. She stood at the edge of the mahogany table, her hands trembling slightly as she held the presentation folder that contained months of research. The quarterly meeting at Harrison Industries was supposed to be her moment to finally contribute something meaningful to her husband's company. Instead, it became the moment that shattered her world. "Ladies and gentlemen," her husband Robert announced from his position at the head of the table, his voice carrying that familiar tone of condescension she had learned to dread over their 8-year marriage. "My wife Alicia has prepared some thoughts about our marketing strategy." The way he said thoughts made it sound like a child's crayon drawing being displayed on a refrigerator. Alicia's heart pounded as she looked around the room. 12 executives in expensive suits stared back at her, their expressions ranging from polite interest to barely concealed amusement. She recognized most of them from company parties where they had treated her like an accessory, Robert's pretty wife who smiled and nodded but never had anything important to say. "Actually," Robert continued, his smile sharp as a blade, "on second thought perhaps we should skip this. My wife is, well, she's not really equipped for this level of discussion. She's too ignorant to speak about business matters that require actual expertise." The silence that followed was deafening. Alicia felt the blood drain from her face as nervous chuckles rippled through the room. Her beautiful features, which had once made Robert proud to have her on his arm, now felt like a mask hiding her humiliation. She clutched the folder tighter, her knuckles going pale against her brown skin. "Robert, I spent weeks preparing this," she managed to whisper, her voice barely audible. "Sweetheart," he said, his tone dripping with false affection, "why don't you go wait in the lobby? Let the grown-ups handle the business talk." More laughter erupted from the table. Even the few women present seemed to find her situation amusing rather than appalling. Alicia's chest felt tight as she struggled to breathe normally. This wasn't the first time Robert had dismissed her in public, but never so cruelly, never in front of so many people who could destroy any hope she had of being taken seriously in the business world. She had given up her own career aspirations years ago to support his climb up the corporate ladder, and this was how he repaid her. "But I have research on consumer behavior patterns that could increase profits by 15%, she said, her voice growing stronger despite her shaking hands. Robert's face darkened. "Alicia, you're embarrassing yourself. You barely finished community college. These people have MBAs from Harvard and Yale. They don't need marketing advice from someone who learned everything she knows from daytime television." The cruelty in his words hit her like physical blows. She saw heads nodding in agreement around the table. Janet Morrison, the only other woman executive present, actually rolled her eyes. Alicia realized with crushing clarity that this wasn't spontaneous mockery. Robert had planned this humiliation. "Maybe she could bring us coffee instead," suggested Tom Bradley, Robert's closest friend and business partner. "That would be more helpful than listening to amateur hour." The room erupted in laughter. Alicia felt tears threatening to spill over, but she refused to give them the satisfaction of seeing her cry. Instead, she straightened her spine and looked directly at Robert. For just a moment she saw something flicker in his eyes, surprise, maybe even a hint of guilt, but it was gone so quickly she might have imagined it. "Of course," she said quietly, placing the folder on the table with deliberate care. "I'll wait outside." As she walked toward the door, her heels clicking against the marble floor, she heard Robert already moving on to the next agenda item as if she had never existed. The hallway outside felt like a sanctuary, but even there she wasn't safe from the echoes of their laughter following her. She slumped against the wall, finally allowing herself to process what had just happened. 8 years of marriage, 8 years of supporting his career, of putting his needs first, of slowly shrinking herself to fit into the small space he had carved out for her in his life. And this was how he saw her, ignorant, embarrassing, worthless. Her phone buzzed with a text message. She pulled it out with shaking hands, expecting maybe an apology from Robert, or at least an explanation. Instead, she saw a message from an unknown number, "Saw what happened in there. You deserve better. Check your email tonight. A friend." Alicia stared at the message, confusion mixing with her humiliation. Who could have sent this? How did they get her number? But more importantly, what did they mean about checking her email? The conference room door opened, and executives began filing out, their voices loud with self-importance as they discussed lunch plans and weekend golf games. None of them looked at her as they passed. She might as well have been invisible. Robert emerged last, straightening his tie with the satisfaction of a man who had just proven his dominance. When he saw her still standing there, his expression shifted to annoyance. "Are you still here?" I thought you went home. I'm your wife, Robert. I drove you here, remember? He sighed dramatically. Right. Well, I'm going to lunch with the board. Take an Uber home. I'll be late tonight, important client dinner. As he walked away without a backward glance, Alicia realized that something fundamental had shifted inside her. The hurt was still there, burning like acid in her chest, but underneath it was something else, something harder and more dangerous. For the first time in years she was angry. Really truly angry. She pulled out her phone and called an Uber, then waited in the marble lobby of Harrison Industries, watching successful people stride past with their confident smiles and purposeful steps. Once upon a time she had been like them. Before Robert, before she had convinced herself that love meant making yourself smaller. The ride home passed in a blur of city traffic and her own racing thoughts. Their penthouse apartment felt like a museum when she walked in, beautiful, expensive, and completely devoid of warmth. Everything was exactly as Robert liked it, from the modern art that made her feel cold to the white furniture that she was afraid to sit on. She went straight to her laptop and opened her email. Among the usual spam and store promotions was a message from someone called V. Noble, with the subject line, "You're stronger than you know." Her finger hovered over the delete button. This could be anything, a scam, a prank, someone who had witnessed her humiliation and wanted to make it worse. But something made her click on it instead. The message was brief. Mrs. Hartley, what happened to you today was unacceptable. You have more potential than your husband will ever possess. If you're ready to discover what you're truly capable of, meet me at Café Luna tomorrow at 2 p.m. I'll be wearing a red scarf. Come alone and bring that presentation you weren't allowed to give. Victoria Noble, Ph.D. Alicia read the message 3 times, her heart beating faster with each word. Dr. Victoria Noble. She knew that name. She was famous in business circles, a consultant who had helped dozens of companies revolutionize their strategies. She had written books, given TED Talks, built an empire from nothing. But why would someone like that care about Alicia's humiliation? How did she even know what had happened? As she sat there staring at the screen, Robert's words echoed in her mind, too ignorant to speak. The old Alicia would have accepted that judgment, would have internalized it and spent the next week apologizing for daring to think she had something valuable to contribute. But the old Alicia had died in that conference room today. She opened a new email and began typing her response to Dr. Noble. Her fingers moved with a certainty she hadn't felt in years, each word a small act of rebellion against the life that had been chosen for her. Dr. Noble, I'll be there. Thank you for seeing something in me that I had forgotten existed. Alicia Hartley. She hit send before she could change her mind, then sat back in her chair and looked around the apartment that had never really felt like home. Tomorrow she would take the first step toward finding out who she really was when no one was telling her to be quiet, to be smaller, to be grateful for scraps of attention from a man who had forgotten how to see her as human. For now, though, she had work to do. She opened the presentation folder she had brought home and began refining her research, adding new data, strengthening her arguments. If Dr. Noble wanted to see what she was capable of, Alicia was going to make sure she was ready to show her. The apartment was silent except for the soft clicking of her keyboard and the distant sound of traffic far below. For the first time in years, Alicia smiled as she worked. She was done being invisible. The next morning arrived gray and cold, matching Alicia's mood as she sat at the kitchen island picking at a piece of toast she didn't want. Robert had come home at 3 in the morning, reeking of expensive perfume that definitely wasn't hers and whiskey that couldn't mask the lies he would inevitably tell. He strolled into the kitchen now, checking his phone with the casual indifference of a man who had already forgotten yesterday's cruelty. His dark hair was perfectly styled, his designer suit immaculate, every inch the successful executive who believed his own press releases. Coffee ready? He asked without looking up from his screen. Alicia poured him a cup, her hand steady despite the storm brewing inside her chest. How was your client dinner last night? Productive. Closed the Brennan account. He took the coffee and finally looked at her, his expression shifting to mild irritation. You look tired. Maybe you should book a spa day or something. The casual dismissal of her emotional state was so typical that Alicia almost laughed. Instead, she studied his face, looking for any sign of the man she had fallen in love with 9 years ago. That Robert had been charming and ambitious, but he had also been kind. He had made her feel like the most interesting person in any room. Robert, about yesterday. What about it? He was already moving toward the door, checking his watch with the impatience of someone whose time was far too valuable to waste on conversations with his wife. You humiliated me in front of your entire board. He paused, his hand on his briefcase. I prevented you from humiliating yourself. There's a difference. The words hit her like a slap, but this time Alicia didn't flinch. By calling me ignorant? By treating me like a child? Robert turned around fully now, his expression hardening into the cold mask she had learned to fear. Alicia, you're being dramatic. I was protecting you from looking foolish in front of people who matter. You should be thanking me. People who matter? The words came out sharper than she intended. I'm your wife. Don't I matter? Of course you matter. But let's be realistic about your strengths. You're beautiful, you're charming at parties, you keep our home running smoothly. Why isn't that enough? Why do you need to pretend you're something you're not? Each word felt like a nail being driven into the coffin of their marriage. Alicia realized with crystal clarity that this wasn't new behavior. It was just the first time she was really hearing it. How many years had he been slowly convincing her that she was less than she was? I have a college degree, Robert. I had a career before I met you. A degree from community college and a job as a sales assistant hardly qualify you to advise Fortune 500 companies. The contempt in his voice was unmistakable now. Alicia felt something crack inside her chest, but it wasn't heartbreak, it was relief. The sound of her illusions finally shattering completely. You're right, she said quietly. I'm not qualified to advise your company. But I'm also not qualified to be treated like garbage by my own husband. Robert's laugh was sharp and humorless. Garbage? Christ, Alicia, you live in a penthouse apartment, wear designer clothes, drive a car that costs more than most people's houses. If this is garbage, sign me up. Money isn't love, Robert. Love. He set down his coffee cup so hard that liquid sloshed over the rim. Love is me working 18-hour days to give you this life. Love is me tolerating your need for constant validation and your ridiculous fantasies about being some kind of business genius. Love is me protecting you from making a fool of yourself in front of people who could destroy my career. Alicia stared at him, seeing him clearly for perhaps the first time in years. When did you start hating me so much? The question seemed to catch him off guard. For just a moment, his mask slipped, and she saw something that might have been regret flash across his features. But it was gone instantly, replaced by his usual arrogance. I don't hate you. I just think you need to accept reality. We both know what this marriage is really about. Enlighten me. You get security, status, a lifestyle you could never afford on your own. I get a beautiful wife who enhances my image and doesn't cause problems. It's worked fine for 8 years. The brutal honesty of it left her breathless. He wasn't even pretending anymore that their marriage was about love or partnership or shared dreams. She was an accessory like his expensive watch or his luxury car. And what about yesterday's performance in the boardroom? She asked. How did that enhance your image? Something flickered in his eyes, uncertainty, maybe even embarrassment. I may have been a bit harsh. But Alicia, you have to understand the pressure I'm under. The board is considering me for senior VP. I can't afford any distractions or complications. Your wife having opinions is a complication? Your wife having opinions she wants to share with my board is a complication, yes. Alicia felt the last of her loyalty to this man evaporate like morning mist. She thought about Dr. Noble's email, about the meeting this afternoon, about the presentation she had spent all night perfecting. For the first time in years, she had something to look forward to that had nothing to do with Robert's approval. I'm meeting a friend for coffee today, she said, surprised by how normal her voice sounded. Fine. Just remember we have the Hendersons' anniversary party tonight. Wear the blue dress, Patricia Henderson likes it. Even her clothing choices weren't her own. Alicia nodded, not trusting herself to speak without screaming. After Robert left, she sat in the pristine kitchen of their expensive apartment and tried to remember the last time she had felt truly happy. The memory that surfaced surprised her. It was from 3 years ago when she had volunteered to help plan a charity fundraiser. She had come up with an innovative auction format that had raised 30% more money than the previous year. Robert had been annoyed that she was spending so much time on amateur charity work, instead of accompanying him to business dinners. She had stopped volunteering after that. The realization that she had been systematically isolated from anything that might have given her confidence or independence hit her like a physical blow. Robert hadn't just belittled her intelligence. He had carefully dismantled every opportunity she had to prove him wrong. Her phone rang, jarring her from her thoughts. The caller ID showed Janet Morrison, the female executive who had been at yesterday's meeting. Alicia almost didn't answer, but curiosity won. Hello? Alicia? It's Janet Morrison from Harrison Industries. Her voice was crisp and professional. I wanted to call and apologize for yesterday. What Robert did was completely inappropriate. Alicia was so surprised she almost dropped the phone. Thank you. I wasn't expecting. Look, I know we've never really talked, but I've been watching what's been happening to you for years. The way Robert treats you, the way he diminishes you in public, it's not okay. I should have said something sooner. Why didn't you? Janet was quiet for a moment. Honestly? Because it was easier to go along with it than to rock the boat. Robert has a lot of power at the company and I was protecting my own career. But yesterday crossed a line. What do you mean? He set you up, Alicia. He knew you had prepared a presentation, and he orchestrated that whole scene to humiliate you in front of the board. Tom Bradley told me later that Robert had been joking about it for days, planning exactly how he was going to put you in your place. The words hit Alicia like ice water. She had suspected as much, but hearing it confirmed made her feel physically sick. Why are you telling me this? Because you deserve to know the truth. And because... Janet paused. Because I got hold of a copy of your presentation. Alicia, it's brilliant. Your analysis of consumer behavior patterns is exactly what our marketing department has been missing. You could have saved the company millions. Alicia felt tears prick her eyes, but they weren't tears of sadness anymore. They were tears of rage. He knew, didn't he? He knew it was good and he destroyed it anyway. Robert's threatened by intelligence in anyone he can't control. Especially you. You're his wife, you're supposed to be his perfect accessory, not someone who might outshine him. After Janet hung up, Alicia sat staring at her phone, processing everything she had learned. Robert hadn't just been cruel, he had been calculating. He had deliberately sabotaged her chance to prove herself because her success would have threatened his narrative about her inadequacy. She thought about all the times he had discouraged her from pursuing interests or opportunities, all the times he had convinced her that she wasn't smart enough or qualified enough or simply enough. How many chances had she lost because she had believed his version of who she was? The anger that had been simmering since yesterday began to boil over. She walked to her laptop and opened her email, reading Dr. Noble's message again. This time, she noticed something she had missed before. The email signature included a line that made her heart race, specializing in helping intelligent women rediscover their power. Alicia looked around the apartment one more time, seeing it with new eyes. The expensive furniture and designer accessories weren't symbols of Robert's love. They were the bars of a beautiful cage he had built around her. But cages could be opened if you knew where to find the key. She had 4 hours until her meeting with Dr. Noble. 4 hours to decide whether she was going to stay trapped in Robert's version of her life or take the first step toward finding out who she really was. The choice, she realized, wasn't really a choice at all. It was a necessity. She was done being small. She was done being grateful for scraps. She was done being the beautiful, silent accessory to someone else's dreams. She opened her laptop and began to type, starting with an email to her lawyer sister in Chicago. It was time to find out exactly what she would be entitled to in a divorce from a man who had just made the biggest mistake of his life. Robert thought he had crushed her yesterday. Instead, he had simply shown her who he really was. And more importantly, he had shown her who she refused to be anymore. Alicia spent the morning in a whirlwind of quiet preparation. She researched Dr. Victoria Noble extensively, finding interviews, articles and video presentations that confirmed what she had suspected. This woman was exactly who she claimed to be. A powerhouse consultant who specialized in business transformation and, according to several profiles, helping women break through barriers in male-dominated industries. More importantly, Dr. Noble had a reputation for seeing potential where others saw only limitations. Her client testimonials were filled with stories of women who had been overlooked, underestimated, and undervalued, until Noble helped them find their voice. At 1:30 p.m., Alicia stood in front of her bedroom mirror, studying her reflection. She had chosen a simple but elegant navy dress that made her feel professional rather than decorative. Her natural hair was pulled back in a sophisticated bun, and she wore minimal makeup that enhanced rather than masked her features. For the first time in years, she was dressing for herself rather than for Robert's approval. She grabbed her presentation folder and a small recording device she had purchased that morning on impulse. Something told her that documenting everything from now on would be important. Café Luna was a small, intimate place in the arts district, far from the corporate restaurants where Robert conducted his business. Alicia arrived 15 minutes early and chose a corner table where she could observe the entrance. Her nerves were jumping, but underneath the anxiety was something else: excitement. When was the last time she had been excited about anything? At exactly 2 p.m., a woman walked through the door who commanded attention without trying. Dr. Victoria Noble was probably in her late 40s, with silver-streaked hair pulled into a loose chignon and intelligent eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. She wore a red scarf as promised, but Alicia would have recognized her anyway from the confidence in her bearing. Their eyes met across the cafe and Dr. Noble smiled, not the polite, social smile Alicia was used to, but something warmer and more genuine. She approached the table with the easy stride of someone who had never doubted her right to take up space in the world. "Alicia Hartley," she said, extending her hand. "I'm Victoria. Thank you for coming." Up close, Dr. Noble was even more impressive. Her handshake was firm, her gaze direct, and she had the kind of presence that made everything around her seem sharper and more real. "Thank you for reaching out," Alicia replied, surprised by how steady her own voice sounded. "Though I have to ask, how did you know what happened yesterday?" Victoria settled into her chair and signaled the waitress for coffee. "Janet Morrison is an old friend. She called me last night, furious about what she had witnessed. But more than that, she was excited about your presentation. She emailed me a copy." Alicia felt her cheeks heat. She wasn't supposed to. She was right to share it. Victoria's voice was firm. "Your analysis is exceptional. Your insights into consumer behavior patterns could revolutionize how companies approach market research. The fact that your husband dismissed it tells me everything I need to know about him and nothing I don't already know about you." The words hung in the air between them, and Alicia felt something shift in her chest. When was the last time someone had called her work exceptional? When was the last time anyone had looked at her and seen potential instead of limitations? "I don't understand why you're interested in helping me," Alicia said quietly. "You don't know me." Victoria leaned forward, her expression serious. 25 years ago, I was in a very similar situation. Married to a man who convinced me that my ideas were worthless, that my ambitions were embarrassing, that my value lay entirely in how well I supported his career. It took me too long to realize that he wasn't protecting me from failure, he was protecting himself from my success. Alicia's breath caught. "What happened?" "I left. Started over with nothing but my education and my determination to prove him wrong. It was terrifying and difficult and the best decision I ever made." Victoria's smile was sharp. "My ex-husband, by the way, is currently working as a mid-level manager at a company I consulted for last year. He reports to a woman half his age who makes twice his salary." Despite everything, Alicia almost smiled. That must have been satisfying. "Extremely. But more satisfying than his downfall was my rise. I built a life and a career that no one could take away from me. I became the person I was always meant to be, instead of the small, quiet version someone else preferred." The waitress brought their coffee, and Alicia used the interruption to process what Victoria was offering. Not just professional advice, but a roadmap out of the life that was slowly suffocating her. "What would it involve?" she asked carefully. "Hypothetically." Victoria opened her briefcase and pulled out a thick folder. "First, we would need to establish your independence. Financial, professional, personal. That means understanding exactly what you're entitled to in a divorce, documenting any assets or evidence that might be relevant, and beginning to build your own professional network." Divorce. The word felt strange in Alicia's mouth, both terrifying and liberating. "Only if that's what you decide you want." "But Alicia, I have to ask, when was the last time your husband made you feel valued? When was the last time he treated you as an equal partner rather than a beautiful accessory?" Alicia thought about it, really thought about it, and realized she couldn't remember. Even in their early days, Robert had been charming and generous, but he had never truly seen her as his intellectual equal. She had been so grateful for his attention that she had never questioned why he seemed to prefer her when she was quiet and agreeable. "He used to be different," she said slowly. "Or maybe I used to be different. People don't change that dramatically. What changes is how clearly we see them." Victoria pulled out a legal pad. "Tell me about your marriage. Start from the beginning." For the next hour, Alicia found herself talking more honestly than she had in years. She told Victoria about giving up her job to support Robert's career, about gradually losing touch with her friends because Robert found them boring or inappropriate for his social circle. She talked about the slow erosion of her confidence, the way Robert had gradually taken over all their financial decisions, even the way he had convinced her that her opinions on everything from politics to movies were naive or misguided. Victoria listened without judgment, taking notes and asking occasional clarifying questions. When Alicia finished, she felt drained but oddly relieved, as if a weight she hadn't realized she was carrying had been lifted. "Classic emotional manipulation," Victoria said matter-of-factly. Your husband has been systematically isolating you and undermining your self-confidence for years. It's a common pattern among men who are threatened by their wives' potential. But why would he be threatened by me? He's successful, he's respected. Because deep down he knows you're more talented than he is. Your presentation proves that. In one document, you identified solutions to problems his entire marketing department has been struggling with for months. Victoria closed her notebook. He's been keeping you small because he knows that if you ever realized your own worth, you wouldn't need him anymore. The truth of it hit Alicia like a physical blow. She thought about all the times Robert had discouraged her from pursuing opportunities, all the times he had made her feel grateful for his tolerance rather than valued for her contributions. What do I do now? She asked. Victoria smiled, and this time it was pure steel. Now we plan your resurrection. But I need to know you're serious about this. Leaving a marriage like yours, building a new life. It's not easy. There will be moments when you'll want to go back, when the familiar cage will seem preferable to the unknown freedom. Are you ready for that fight? Alicia thought about yesterday's humiliation, about Robert's casual cruelty this morning, about the years she had spent making herself smaller to fit into his vision of who she should be. She thought about Janet Morrison's revelation that Robert had planned her public humiliation, and about all the dreams she had abandoned because he had convinced her they were foolish. Yes, she said, and the word felt like a key turning in a lock. I'm ready. Victoria nodded, pulling out a business card and writing something on the back. This is my personal number. I want you to call me every day for the next week just to check in. The first few days are the hardest. That's when the doubt creeps in, when you start second-guessing yourself. She handed Alicia the card along with a thick manila envelope. This contains contact information for the best divorce attorney in the city, a financial advisor who specializes in asset protection, and a private investigator who can help document anything you might need for the proceedings. It also has information about a business incubator program I run for women entrepreneurs. Alicia stared at the envelope, her heart racing. This was real. She was really going to do this. One more thing, Victoria said, her voice gentle but firm. Don't tell Robert about any of this yet. Not until you have all your ducks in a row. Men like him can become dangerous when they realize they're losing control. Dangerous how? Financially, professionally, sometimes personally. They'll try to isolate you further, turn people against you, make you question your own sanity. The key is to be prepared for every possible scenario before you make your move. As they stood to leave, Victoria placed a hand on Alicia's shoulder. You're about to discover who you really are when no one is telling you to be smaller. It's going to be extraordinary. Walking back to her car, Alicia felt like she was moving through a different world. The same streets, the same buildings, but everything looked different when seen through the eyes of someone who was no longer willing to accept less than she deserved. She had one stop to make before going home. The bank where she and Robert held their joint accounts. It was time to find out exactly what she was walking away from, and what she was walking toward. The afternoon sun felt brighter on her face as she drove across town, and for the first time in years, Alicia Hartley smiled with genuine anticipation for what tomorrow might bring. The gleaming towers of downtown seemed different as Alicia navigated the morning traffic 3 days later. She was heading to Victoria's office for their first official mentoring session, and her stomach was a tangle of nerves and excitement. The past few days had been a whirlwind of secret phone calls with lawyers, careful documentation of financial records, and the delicate dance of acting normal around Robert while planning her escape. Victoria Noble's office occupied the entire 40th floor of the Meridian building, with floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a stunning view of the city. The reception area was elegant but not ostentatious, decorated with awards and photos of Victoria with various business leaders and politicians. Everything about the space projected competence and success. Mrs. Hartley? The receptionist, a young man with kind eyes and a professional smile, gestured toward a set of double doors. Dr. Noble is waiting for you in her private office. Victoria's inner sanctum was even more impressive than the reception area. Books lined 2 walls from floor to ceiling, and her massive desk was covered with papers, charts, and what looked like architectural plans. Despite the obvious signs of a busy mind at work, everything felt organized and purposeful. Alicia. Victoria looked up from her computer, her face lighting up with genuine pleasure. Come in, sit down. How are you feeling? Terrified and exhilarated in equal measure, Alicia admitted, settling into one of the comfortable leather chairs facing Victoria's desk. I met with the lawyer yesterday. Patricia Chin? What did you think of her? She's intense. But she made me realize how much I didn't know about my own financial situation. Alicia pulled out a folder of documents. Apparently, Robert has been very careful about keeping most of our assets in his name only. The apartment, the cars, even most of the investment accounts. Victoria nodded grimly. Classic control tactic. What about the business interests? That's where it gets interesting. Patricia thinks I might have a claim to part of Harrison Industries. Not because of my marriage to Robert, but because of my unpaid contributions to the company. All those events I planned, the research I did for his presentations, the client relationships I helped maintain, she says there's legal precedent for considering that sweat equity. Smart woman, Patricia. What else? Alicia hesitated, then pulled out a small recording device. I've been documenting our conversations. Robert's been more honest about his feelings lately. He actually said yesterday that he considers our marriage a business arrangement where I provide image enhancement in exchange for financial security. Victoria raised an eyebrow. He said that on tape? He was drunk, but yes. Patricia says it could be useful in proving that the marriage was never a true partnership. Alicia put the device away. But enough about the divorce logistics. You said you wanted to talk about my future, not just my exit strategy. Victoria's smile was approving. I like how your mind works. Yes, let's talk about what comes next. She pulled out a thick binder and placed it between them. This is the curriculum for my executive development program. 6 months of intensive training in business strategy, financial management, leadership, and presentation skills. By the end, you'll be ready to launch your own consulting firm or step into a senior role at any company that's smart enough to hire you. Alicia flipped through the binder, her excitement growing with each page. Leadership psychology, market analysis, strategic planning, negotiation tactics. It was everything she had dreamed of learning but had convinced herself she wasn't capable of understanding. This looks incredible, but Victoria, I have to be honest, I don't know if I can afford something like this. The divorce is going to be expensive, and I'll need to establish my own living situation. Victoria held up a hand. The program is free for women in your situation. I call it my Phoenix Scholarship, for women rising from the ashes of marriages that tried to burn them down. Her expression grew serious. But I don't offer it to everyone. I only work with women who I believe have the potential and the determination to truly succeed. Are you one of those women, Alicia? The question hung in the air between them, weighted with possibility and challenge. Alicia thought about the presentation that had impressed Janet Morrison, about the charity fundraiser she had revolutionized years ago, about all the times she had bitten her tongue when she knew she had better ideas than the people Robert surrounded himself with. Yes, she said, and this time the word came without hesitation. I am. Good. Because the work starts now and it won't be easy. The first assignment is to complete a comprehensive business plan for your own consulting firm. You'll need to identify your target market, develop service offerings, create financial projections, and design a marketing strategy. Victoria pulled out another folder. I've taken the liberty of researching companies that could benefit from your particular expertise in consumer behavior analysis. There are at least a dozen firms in this city alone that are struggling with the exact problems your Harrison Industries presentation addressed. Alicia's mind began racing as she looked through the company profiles. Tech startups trying to understand why their apps weren't gaining traction. Established retailers struggling to connect with younger demographics. Service companies whose customer satisfaction ratings had been declining for years. How do you know all this? She asked. Because I've been consulting in this city for 15 years and I pay attention. Most business problems boil down to companies not understanding their customers. You have a gift for seeing patterns that others miss. Your Harrison presentation proved that. Now we just need to teach you how to package that gift and sell it to people who need it. Over the next 2 hours, Victoria walked Alicia through the basics of starting a consulting business. They discussed everything from setting hourly rates to building client relationships to managing cash flow. It was more practical business education than Alicia had received in all her years of community college. Now, Victoria said as their session was winding down, let's talk about your presentation skills. You'll need to be able to sell your ideas to rooms full of executives who will initially see you as Robert sees you, a pretty face without substance. We need to prepare you to change their minds within the first 30 seconds. She led Alicia to a smaller conference room equipped with cameras and presentation screens. This is where we practice. I want you to give me the presentation you prepared for Harrison Industries, but this time, deliver it like you're worth listening to. Alicia felt her old nervousness creeping back. I'm not sure I remember it all. You remember every word. Your brain doesn't forget things that matter to you, it just gets scared of sharing them. Victoria settled into a chair and folded her hands. Pretend I'm a potential client who's skeptical about hiring a consultant who doesn't have an MBA from an Ivy League school. Convince me I'm wrong. Taking a deep breath, Alicia moved to the front of the room and began to speak. At first, her voice was tentative, but as she got into the material she was passionate about, her confidence grew. She talked about consumer behavior patterns, about the disconnect between what companies thought their customers wanted and what they actually purchased, about simple changes that could increase customer loyalty by significant percentages. When she finished, Victoria was quiet for a long moment. Then she began to clap, slowly at first, then with genuine enthusiasm. "Brilliant," she said simply. "Absolutely brilliant. Do you realize what you just did? You presented complex data analysis in terms that any business owner could understand and act on. That's not just intelligence, Alicia, that's wisdom." The praise felt different from anything Alicia was used to receiving. Robert's compliments had always been about her appearance or her social skills, things that made him look good by association. Victoria was celebrating her mind, her insights, her ability to see solutions where others saw only problems. "There's one more thing we need to discuss," Victoria said as they returned to her office. "Robert is going to try to sabotage this. When he realizes you're becoming independent, when he sees that you're building something that doesn't revolve around him, he's going to do everything in his power to stop you." "Like what?" "He might try to turn your mutual friends against you. He might spread rumors about your mental state or your qualifications. He might even try to damage your professional reputation before you have a chance to establish it." Victoria's expression was grim. Men like Robert don't give up control easily. Alicia felt a chill run down her spine. "So what do I do?" "You document everything. You build a network of allies who see your value. And most importantly, you become so successful so quickly that his opinion stops mattering." Victoria pulled out a business card. "This is James Patterson. He runs the most prestigious business incubator in the state. He's agreed to meet with you next week." "Based on what?" "He doesn't know anything about me. He knows you impressed me and that's enough for now. But you'll need to impress him on your own merits." Victoria leaned forward. "Are you ready for that level of pressure? Because once we set this in motion, there's no going back to being Robert's quiet, decorative wife." Alicia thought about the woman she had been 3 days ago, standing in that conference room while her husband called her ignorant in front of a room full of people. That woman felt like a stranger now, someone from a different lifetime. "I'm not going back," she said firmly. "I can't. Even if this all falls apart, even if I fail spectacularly, I can't go back to being invisible." Victoria smiled, and this time it was pure pride. "Then we better make sure you don't fail. Your homework for this week is to complete the first 3 sections of your business plan and prepare a 20-minute presentation for James Patterson. I want you to show him exactly what Harrison Industries missed when they dismissed you." As Alicia gathered her materials and prepared to leave, Victoria walked her to the elevator. "One last piece of advice," she said. "Don't tell Robert about any of this yet. Let him think you're just going through a phase, maybe seeing a therapist to deal with your sensitivity about the other day. The element of surprise will be crucial when you're ready to make your move." The elevator doors opened and Alicia stepped inside. As they began to close, Victoria called out one final thought. "Alicia? That woman who gave the presentation just now? She's who you really are. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise." The ride down 40 floors gave Alicia time to process everything that had happened. 6 months ago, her biggest concern had been whether the caterer for Robert's office party would be able to accommodate dietary restrictions. Now she was planning to launch her own business and potentially transform her entire life. The thought should have been terrifying. Instead, as she walked out into the bright afternoon sunshine, Alicia felt more alive than she had in years. She had work to do, a future to build, and for the first time since she could remember, she couldn't wait to get started. Her phone buzzed with a text from Robert. "Working late again tonight. Don't wait up." Alicia smiled as she typed back, "No problem. I have work to do too." It wasn't a lie. She did have work to do. The most important work of her life. 3 weeks into her intensive training with Victoria, Alicia barely recognized the woman she saw in the mirror each morning. The changes weren't just physical, though she had started dressing more professionally and carrying herself with new confidence, but deeper. She thought differently, spoke differently, even walked differently. The woman who had once apologized for taking up space was learning to command rooms. "Your market analysis is exceptional," Victoria said, reviewing Alicia's latest assignment. They were meeting in Victoria's conference room, where Alicia had been practicing presentations every other day. "But I want to push you further. Anyone can analyze existing markets. True innovators create new ones. Alicia looked up from her notes, intrigued. What do you mean? Your research shows that there's a gap in how companies understand consumer behavior, particularly among women and minorities. Most market research firms are run by white men who assume their perspective is universal. What if you positioned yourself not just as another consultant, but as someone who can unlock markets that other firms don't even know exist? The idea sent electricity through Alicia's veins. She thought about all the times she had seen companies make obvious mistakes in their marketing to people who looked like her, all the products that failed because the people creating them had never bothered to ask what their target consumers actually wanted. That's brilliant, she said slowly. I could specialize in helping companies reach underserved demographics. Not just as a diversity initiative, but as a genuine business opportunity. Exactly. And you'd have credibility that other consultants lack because you've lived the experience of being overlooked and underestimated. Your personal story becomes part of your professional brand. Over the next hour, they completely reimagined Alicia's business plan. Instead of positioning herself as a general marketing consultant, she would become a specialist in unlocking hidden market potential. Her target clients would be companies struggling to understand why their products weren't resonating with diverse consumer bases. This gives you a competitive advantage that no one can replicate, Victoria explained. Your background, your perspective, your insights, they're uniquely yours. Robert can never take credit for this because he could never do what you're about to do. The mention of Robert sent a familiar spike of anxiety through Alicia's chest. Living with him while secretly planning her independence was becoming increasingly difficult. He had noticed her new confidence and was responding with more frequent put-downs and attempts to control her schedule. Speaking of Robert, Alicia said carefully, he's been asking a lot of questions about where I'm spending my time. I told him I was seeing a therapist, but I'm not sure he believes me. Victoria's expression grew serious. What kind of questions? He wants to know who the therapist is, where the office is located, why I need so many appointments. Yesterday he suggested that maybe I should find someone more qualified, and offered to ask his assistant to research psychiatrists who specialize in women's emotional issues. Classic gaslighting. He's trying to make you question your own judgment while positioning himself as the reasonable, helpful husband. Victoria pulled out her phone. I'm going to give you the number of a real therapist, Dr. Sarah Martinez. She specializes in helping women transition out of controlling relationships. If Robert checks up on you, you'll have legitimate appointments to point to. Alicia took the number gratefully. The web of deception she was weaving felt necessary but exhausting. Every conversation with Robert required careful thought about what information might give away her plans. There's something else, she admitted. Robert announced that we're hosting a dinner party next weekend for some potential investors. He wants me to play the perfect hostess while he pitches a new project. What kind of project? Something about expanding Harrison Industries into new markets. He's been very secretive about the details, but I overheard him on a phone call talking about untapped demographic opportunities and authentic cultural insights. Victoria went very still. Show me exactly what you wrote in your business plan about serving underrepresented markets. Alicia pulled out her folder and handed over the relevant sections. As Victoria read, her expression grew darker. Son of a bitch, Victoria muttered. He's been monitoring your computer use, hasn't he? Checking your browser history, maybe even installing tracking software. The possibility hadn't occurred to Alicia, but now that Victoria mentioned it, Robert had been making oddly specific comments about her activities. Just yesterday he had mentioned that she seemed to be doing a lot of research on business topics lately. We need to assume he knows about your business plan, Victoria said grimly. Which means he's either going to try to sabotage it or steal it. Steal it? How could he steal a business plan? By implementing the strategy at Harrison Industries and claiming it was his idea. Think about it, he has the resources, the connections, and the platform to launch exactly what you're proposing. And who's going to believe that the brilliant new market expansion strategy came from his ignorant wife rather than from him? The betrayal was so audacious, so perfectly in character for Robert, that Alicia felt physically sick. What do I do? First, we protect your intellectual property. I want you to file preliminary paperwork to trademark your consulting methodology and register your business name today. Second, we accelerate your timeline. Instead of waiting 6 months to launch, we're going public with your business in 3 weeks. 3 weeks? But I'm not ready. You're more ready than you think. And if we wait any longer, Robert might succeed in stealing your thunder. Victoria was already reaching for her phone. I'm calling James Patterson. We're moving up your presentation to this Friday. Alicia felt panic rising in her chest. Victoria, I can't present to investors in 3 days. I'm still learning how to project confidence in a mirror, let alone in front of strangers who could fund or destroy my future. Victoria put down her phone and fixed Alicia with a steady gaze. Do you remember what you told me 3 weeks ago? That you couldn't go back to being invisible? Yes, but this is what not being invisible looks like. It means being ready when the opportunity comes, not when you feel prepared. It means trusting that your intelligence and your passion are enough to overcome your fear. The words hit Alicia like a challenge and a comfort at the same time. She thought about the woman she had been a month ago, grateful for scraps of recognition from a man who saw her as a decorative object. Then she thought about the presentation she had given Victoria, about the insights that had impressed Janet Morrison, about the business plan that was apparently good enough for Robert to steal. Okay, she said, surprised by how calm her voice sounded. Let's do it. Victoria smiled. That's the spirit. Now let's talk about what you're going to wear. First impressions matter, and we want to make sure they remember you for all the right reasons. For the next 2 hours, they planned every detail of Alicia's presentation. Victoria coached her on body language, vocal projection, and how to handle aggressive questioning. They practiced transitioning from slides to personal anecdotes, from data analysis to emotional appeals. Remember, Victoria said as they wrapped up, you're not just selling a business plan. You're selling yourself. Your unique perspective, your untapped potential, your ability to see opportunities that others miss. That's not something Robert can steal because it's not something he possesses. As Alicia drove home that evening, she felt the familiar combination of excitement and terror that had become her constant companion. But underneath both emotions was something new, a sense of inevitability. She was no longer just planning to leave Robert, she was planning to surpass him. The apartment felt different when she walked in, as if she was seeing it from the perspective of someone who would soon be living somewhere else. Robert was in his study, door closed, voice raised in what sounded like an argument over the phone. She could hear fragments, unacceptable delays, and promised timeline, and investors expect results. She smiled grimly as she headed to her own laptop. Let him worry about his timelines and his investors. In 3 days she would be presenting her own vision to people who might actually appreciate her intelligence instead of fearing it. For the first time since this journey began, Alicia felt like she was playing offense instead of defense. Robert thought he was still controlling the game, but he had no idea that the rules had changed. She was no longer his wife learning to be independent. She was an entrepreneur preparing to compete with him directly. And she intended to win. The morning of her presentation to James Patterson arrived gray and drizzling, matching the knots in Alicia's stomach. She had spent the previous 3 days in intensive preparation with Victoria, rehearsing every word, anticipating every possible question, polishing her delivery until it felt like second nature. But knowing her material and actually presenting it to someone who could change her life were two very different things. Remember, Victoria said as they rode the elevator up to Patterson's office, you belong in that room. Your ideas are solid, your research is thorough, and your perspective is exactly what the business world needs right now. Alicia smoothed her navy blue suit jacket and checked her reflection in the elevator's polished walls. She had chosen her outfit carefully, professional but not trying too hard, confident but not arrogant. Her natural hair was styled in a sleek low bun, and she wore minimal jewelry except for small diamond earrings that had been her grandmother's. The Patterson Group occupied the top 3 floors of one of the city's most prestigious buildings. The elevator opened into a reception area that practically hummed with success, original artwork, fresh flowers, and the kind of understated luxury that whispered rather than shouted about money. Dr. Noble. Ms. Hartley. James Patterson himself emerged from a corner office, his smile genuine and his handshake firm. He was younger than Alicia had expected, probably mid-40s, with the kind of energy that made the air around him feel charged with possibility. Thank you for agreeing to meet with me on such short notice, Alicia said, proud that her voice remained steady. When Victoria Noble tells me someone has ideas worth hearing, I listen. She's been responsible for some of my most successful investments. He gestured toward a sleek conference room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Shall we? The next 20 minutes would determine whether Alicia's new life began today or whether she would have to find another path forward. She connected her laptop to the room's presentation system, took a deep breath, and began. 3 months ago, I was just another corporate wife, invisible in boardrooms, dismissed by executives who saw me as decoration rather than competition. Today, I'm here to show you why that dismissal represents one of the biggest missed opportunities in modern business. She clicked to her first slide, which showed market research data about consumer spending patterns among women and minorities. The combined purchasing power of women and people of color in this country exceeds $2 trillion annually. Yet most companies are leaving money on the table because they fundamentally misunderstand these markets. For the next 15 minutes, Alicia presented her case with the passion of someone who had lived the problem she was solving. She talked about companies that had failed to connect with diverse consumers, about marketing campaigns that missed the mark because they were created by people who had never experienced the perspectives they were trying to reach. This isn't about political correctness or social responsibility, she emphasized. This is about profit. Companies that truly understand diverse markets consistently outperform those that don't. And right now, there's a massive gap in the consulting market for someone who can help businesses bridge that understanding. James asked pointed questions about her methodology, her target client base, her financial projections. Each question felt like a test, but Alicia found herself answering with confidence that surprised even her. Victoria's training had prepared her for this, but more than that, she genuinely believed in what she was proposing. Your analysis is compelling, James said when she finished. But I have to ask, what makes you think you can compete with established firms that have been doing market research for decades? It was the question Alicia had been dreading and preparing for in equal measure. She looked out at the city skyline for a moment, gathering her thoughts, then turned back to face him directly. Because those established firms have a blind spot they don't even know exists. They hire people who look like them, think like them, and assume that everyone else thinks like them too. I've been on the other side of that assumption my entire adult life. I know what it feels like to be misunderstood, overlooked, and underestimated by people who should know better. She clicked to her final slide, which showed projected growth rates for companies that successfully engaged diverse markets versus those that didn't. My husband dismissed my business insights as the opinions of someone too ignorant to speak. 3 days later, his company's marketing department presented a campaign to target younger demographics that was almost identical to research I had done months earlier, except they got it completely wrong because they didn't understand their target audience. James leaned forward, clearly intrigued. What happened? Their campaign flopped spectacularly. Cost them over $2 million and damaged relationships with several key retail partners. All because they assumed they could speak to communities they had never bothered to understand. And you could have prevented that? I tried to. But nobody was listening to the corporate wife with the community college degree. Alicia smiled grimly. Now I'm going to make sure that when I talk, people listen. James was quiet for a long moment, studying her with the intensity of someone accustomed to making decisions that could make or break careers. Finally, he turned to Victoria. You weren't kidding about her potential. I never kid about business, Victoria replied. Alicia has something that can't be taught or bought, authentic insight into markets that most consultants can only guess about. James turned back to Alicia. What do you need from me? The question hung in the air, loaded with possibility. Alicia had rehearsed this moment with Victoria, but now that it was here, she felt the weight of her entire future balancing on her next words. Seed funding to launch properly. Enough to cover office space, initial marketing, and operating expenses for the first 6 months. In exchange, I'm offering 20% equity in what I believe will become the premier consulting firm for authentic market engagement. How much seed funding? $200,000. James didn't flinch at the number. And what's your timeline for breaking even? 18 months. I already have 3 potential clients who have expressed serious interest based on preliminary conversations. This was a slight exaggeration. She had 2 potential clients and 1 company that had responded positively to a cold email, but Victoria had coached her that confidence was crucial in these situations. I'll need to see your full business plan and financial projections, James said. But based on what I've seen today, I'm inclined to move forward. Alicia felt her heart skip a beat. Really? Really? Victoria was right, you have something special. More importantly, you have the passion and intelligence to execute on it. He stood and extended his hand. I'll have my people draw up a preliminary agreement. Congratulations, Miss Hartley. You're about to become an entrepreneur. As they shook hands, Alicia felt something shift inside her chest. 3 months ago, she had been a woman whose biggest decision was what to cook for dinner. Now she was a business owner with an investor who believed in her vision. Victoria was beaming as they left the building. I told you that you were ready. I can't believe that just happened, Alicia said, still processing the reality of her situation. James Patterson wants to invest in my company. My company. Believe it, and get ready for the hard work to really begin. You have a business to build and a life to completely reconstruct. As they walked to their cars, Alicia's phone buzzed with a text from Robert. Dinner with the Hendersons tonight. Don't be late. She stared at the message for a moment, then deleted it without responding. Robert's demands felt like echoes from a previous life, increasingly irrelevant to the woman she was becoming. Victoria, she said as they reached the parking garage, I think it's time to tell Robert about the divorce. Victoria raised an eyebrow. Are you sure you're ready for that conversation? Alicia thought about the presentation she had just given, about James Patterson's enthusiasm for her ideas, about the business she was about to build with her own intelligence and determination. I'm ready, she said. In fact, I can't wait. The old Alicia might have been terrified of Robert's reaction. The new Alicia was curious to see how he would handle being on the receiving end of a surprise for once. Either way, she was done living his version of her story. It was time to start writing her own. The evening air was crisp as Alicia walked into their apartment, her confidence from the successful presentation still humming through her veins. She had spent the afternoon with Victoria's lawyer, Patricia Chin, finalizing the divorce papers and preparing for what would undoubtedly be a difficult conversation. Robert was in the living room, dressed in his expensive suit and checking his watch with obvious annoyance. The Henderson dinner? She had completely forgotten about it, and for the first time in 8 years she didn't care. Where have you been? He demanded without looking up from his phone. We're supposed to leave in 20 minutes and you're not even dressed. Alicia set down her briefcase and studied her husband. Even a week ago, his irritation would have sent her scrambling to apologize and get ready. Now, she felt nothing but a mild curiosity about how he would react to what she was about to tell him. I'm not going to the Henderson dinner, she said calmly. Robert's head snapped up. What do you mean you're not going? Patricia Henderson specifically asked for you. She wants to discuss some charity event you helped her with years ago. Then she can call me directly instead of going through you. Alicia moved to the bar cart and poured herself a glass of wine, taking her time with the ritual. We need to talk, Robert. Something in her tone must have registered because his expression shifted from annoyance to wariness. Talk about what? And why aren't you getting dressed? Alicia took a sip of wine and sat down across from him, crossing her legs and meeting his gaze directly. I want a divorce. The words hung in the air between them like a challenge. Robert's face went through several expressions in rapid succession. Confusion, disbelief, and then something that looked almost like relief before settling into his familiar mask of control. You want a what? He laughed, but it sounded forced. Alicia, where is this coming from? Are you having some kind of breakdown? Because if you are, we can get you help. I'm not having a breakdown. I'm having a breakthrough. She reached into her briefcase and pulled out a folder of documents. These are divorce papers. They've been filed with the court. You're being served officially on Monday, but I wanted to tell you myself first. Robert stared at the papers as if they were written in a foreign language. This is insane. You can't just decide you want a divorce out of nowhere. We're married, Alicia. We have a life together. We have a business arrangement together. You said so yourself, remember? You provide financial security, I provide image enhancement. Well, I don't need your security anymore, and apparently, you don't value my enhancement. That's not. I didn't mean. Robert was stammering now, his usual confidence cracking. Look, if this is about what happened at the office, I already apologized for that. I was under pressure. You never apologized. Alicia's voice remained calm, but there was steel underneath it. You explained why you were justified in humiliating me in front of your colleagues. There's a difference. Robert stood up and began pacing, his movements sharp and agitated. Okay, fine. I'm sorry. I was wrong to say what I said. But we can work through this. We can go to counseling, take a vacation, whatever you need. What I need is a husband who sees me as an equal partner instead of a decorative accessory. What I need is someone who builds me up instead of tearing me down to make himself feel bigger. Alicia set down her wine glass. You can't give me those things, Robert, because you don't believe I deserve them. That's not true. The words came out louder than he probably intended. I love you, Alicia. I've given you everything. This apartment, your clothes, your car, the best life I could provide. You've given me things. That's not the same as love. She pulled out another document from her folder. This is a financial analysis of our marriage. Did you know that the charity events I organized for your company raised over $3 million in new business relationships? Or that the client entertainment I managed helped close deals worth $15 million? Robert's face was pale now. Where did you get those numbers? I had a forensic accountant go through your company's records. Amazing what becomes public information when you know how to look for it. Alicia smiled, but it wasn't friendly. I also found some interesting expense reports. The Carlton Hotel, for instance. You've charged quite a few client dinners there over the past 2 years. Robert went very still. What are you implying? I'm not implying anything. I'm stating facts. The Carlton Hotel doesn't have a restaurant, Robert. It's where you've been meeting your girlfriend every Tuesday and Thursday for the past 18 months. The silence stretched between them like a taut wire. Robert's mask of controlled authority was crumbling, revealing something smaller and more desperate underneath. How did you? He stopped himself, but it was too late. How did I find out? Easy. I hired a private investigator. Turns out that when you're planning to divorce someone, you should probably make sure you know exactly what they've been doing with marital assets. Alicia pulled out a thick envelope. Would you like to see the photos? They're quite detailed. Robert sank back into his chair, his face ashen. Alicia, let me explain. No need. I already know everything I need to know. Her name is Amanda Rodriguez. She works in your marketing department. She's 26 years old, which makes her young enough to be impressed by your senior executive routine. Alicia's voice remained conversational, almost friendly. She's also not very bright, judging by the marketing campaigns she's been working on. It's not serious. It doesn't mean anything. Really? Because according to your credit card statements, you've spent over $40,000 on her in the past year. Jewelry, clothes, that weekend trip to Napa that you told me was a company retreat. Alicia tilted her head. Either you're a very generous employer, or it means more than you're admitting. Robert's composure finally cracked completely. Fine. Yes, I've been seeing Amanda. But it's not about not loving you. It's about, she doesn't question everything I do. She doesn't make me feel like I have to justify every decision. She doesn't challenge you, you mean. She makes you feel like the smartest person in the room because she doesn't know enough to disagree with you. Maybe that's what I need. Maybe I need someone who appreciates what I've accomplished instead of constantly trying to prove she's as smart as I am. There it was, the truth he had been hiding even from himself. Alicia felt a strange sense of relief hearing him finally admit what she had suspected for years. So this is my fault? I made you cheat by being too intelligent. You made me feel diminished. Every time you had an opinion about business, every time you questioned my strategies, every time you acted like you understood things you couldn't possibly understand. Like the marketing campaign that failed last month? The one that cost your company $2 million. Alicia pulled out one more document. Because I have the research I tried to present 3 months ago. The research that would have prevented that disaster if anyone had bothered to listen to me. Robert's eyes widened as he recognized his company's letterhead on the document. How did you get internal company reports? Janet Morrison. Turns out she was paying attention when you humiliated me in that boardroom. She was also paying attention when the marketing strategy one tried to present could have saved the company from their biggest failure of the year. Alicia stood up and walked to the window looking out at the city lights. Janet wasn't the only one who noticed, by the way. 3 other executives from that meeting have reached out to me since then. They want to hire me as a consultant. That's impossible. You don't have any credentials. I have results. I have insights that your entire marketing department missed. And as of this afternoon, I have an investor who believes in my potential enough to fund my own consulting firm. Robert stared at her as if she had grown a second head. Your own? What are you talking about? I'm talking about the fact that while you were busy trying to make me feel small, I was building something bigger than you ever imagined I could handle. Alicia turned back to face him. I'm launching Hartley Consulting next month. My focus will be helping companies understand markets that traditional firms consistently misread. You can't use our name for your business. It's my name too, Robert. But don't worry, after the divorce is final, you won't have to be associated with it. The full scope of what was happening seemed to hit Robert all at once. His wife wasn't just leaving him, she was competing with him. And from the sound of it, she might actually succeed. This is insane. You can't possibly think you can run a business. You've never even had a real job. You're right. I've never had a real job because I was too busy doing unpaid work for your career. But that ends now. Alicia finished her wine and set the glass down with finality. I'm staying at the Meridian Hotel until I find my own place. My lawyer will be in touch about asset division. As she headed toward the bedroom to pack a bag, Robert called after her. Alicia, wait. We can work this out. I'll end things with Amanda. We can start over. She paused in the doorway and looked back at him. For just a moment she saw not the successful executive or the cruel husband, but the insecure man who had been so threatened by her potential that he had spent years trying to convince her she didn't have any. No, Robert. We can't. Because even if you ended things with Amanda, even if you apologized for every cruel thing you've ever said to me, you still wouldn't see me as your equal. And I finally understand that I deserve better than that. 30 minutes later, Alicia walked out of the apartment that had been her prison for 8 years, carrying 2 suitcases and a sense of freedom she had forgotten was possible. Her phone was already buzzing with texts from Robert, alternating between apologies and threats, but she turned it off without reading them. The Meridian Hotel lobby was elegant and welcoming, full of business travelers and tourists who had no idea they were witnessing someone's rebirth. As Alicia checked in, she caught her reflection in the lobby's mirrors and was surprised by what she saw. Not a broken woman fleeing a marriage, but someone who looked calm, determined, and oddly triumphant. Her suite on the 20th floor had a view of the city that sparkled with possibility. She unpacked her essentials, opened her laptop, and began working on the final details of her business launch. Tomorrow she would start her new life in earnest. Tonight, she wanted to savor the moment when everything had finally clicked into place. Her phone rang, Victoria's number. She had texted her mentor earlier to confirm that the conversation with Robert had gone as planned. "How do you feel?" Victoria asked without preamble. "Free," Alicia said simply. "Terrified and exhilarated and completely overwhelmed, but mostly free. Good. Because tomorrow the real work begins. James Patterson's people want to meet with you to finalize the investment terms. I've also set up meetings with 2 potential clients who are very interested in your services." Already? Word travels fast in business circles. Especially when someone like Janet Morrison starts talking about the brilliant consultant who could have saved Harrison Industries from their recent marketing disaster. Alicia smiled, thinking about Robert's face when he realized that his humiliation of her had ultimately led to her success. What about Robert? Should I expect him to try to sabotage things? Almost certainly. But here's the thing about men like Robert. They're so convinced of their own superiority that they underestimate everyone else. He'll probably try some heavy-handed tactics that will only make him look petty and desperate. And Amanda? Victoria's laugh was sharp. Amanda Rodriguez is about to learn that being the other woman isn't quite as glamorous when the wife stops playing victim and starts playing hardball. Robert's going to need a scapegoat for his current problems, and she's the most convenient target. As if summoned by their conversation, Alicia's phone buzzed with an unknown number. She almost ignored it, but something made her answer. "Alicia." The voice was young, nervous, and definitely female. "This is Amanda Rodriguez. I think we need to talk." The morning of the Regional Business Innovation Conference dawned bright and clear, as if even the weather was conspiring to make this day perfect for Alicia's public debut. She stood in her hotel room, putting the finishing touches on her appearance for what would be the most important presentation of her life. Victoria had managed to get her a speaking slot at the conference. A 20-minute presentation on unlocking hidden market potential, to an audience of 300 business leaders, investors, and media representatives. It was exactly the kind of platform that could launch a consulting career or destroy it before it began. More importantly, Robert would be there. Harrison Industries was a conference sponsor, and he was scheduled to speak right after her about traditional excellence in modern markets. The irony wasn't lost on either of them. "You look perfect," Victoria said as she arrived to escort Alicia to the convention center. Professional, confident, ready to change some minds. Alicia smoothed her emerald green dress, a color that complemented her skin tone beautifully and projected both authority and approachability. She had chosen every detail carefully, from her understated jewelry to her comfortable but elegant heels. This presentation wasn't just about her ideas, it was about establishing herself as someone to be taken seriously. The convention center was buzzing with energy as they arrived. Alicia recognized several faces from the business community, including some who had been at that infamous boardroom meeting 3 months ago. She wondered what they would think when they realized who was on the speaking schedule. "Alicia." James Patterson appeared at her elbow, his smile broad and genuine. "Ready to show everyone what they've been missing?" "As ready as I'll ever be," she replied, surprised by how calm she felt. The nervousness was there, but it was overshadowed by a deep sense of rightness. This was where she belonged, not in some corporate wife role, but center stage, sharing ideas that could change how business was done. "Good morning, ladies and gentlemen." The conference organizer's voice boomed over the auditorium as the opening session began. "We're thrilled to begin today with a presentation from someone who represents the future of strategic business consulting, Alicia Hartley, founder of Hartley Consulting. Alicia walked onto the stage to polite applause, but she could feel the curiosity in the room. Many people were probably wondering who she was and how she had earned a spot on such a prestigious program. In the back of the auditorium, she spotted Robert sitting with several Harrison Industries executives, his face a mask of barely controlled rage. Perfect. 3 months ago, Alicia began, her voice carrying clearly through the auditorium's sound system. I sat in a corporate boardroom while my husband told a room full of executives that I was too ignorant to speak about business matters. Today, I'm here to show you exactly how expensive that kind of ignorance can be. The room went dead silent. She had their attention now, not just polite conference interest, but genuine curiosity about where this was going. The company in question lost over $2 million 6 weeks later on a marketing campaign that failed spectacularly. The failure wasn't due to lack of resources or poor execution. It failed because the people creating it fundamentally misunderstood their target market. She clicked to her first slide, which showed demographic data about consumer spending patterns. Ladies and gentlemen, we are sitting on the largest market opportunity in history, and most of us are completely blind to it. Women and minorities control over 60% of consumer spending in this country, yet most marketing strategies are still designed by and for white men in their 40s. For the next 15 minutes, Alicia walked the audience through case studies, data analysis, and practical strategies for reaching underserved markets. She talked about companies that had succeeded by truly understanding diverse consumers and others that had failed by making assumptions based on their own limited perspectives. But it wasn't just the data that captivated the audience, it was her personal story woven throughout. She talked about being dismissed and underestimated, about having insights ignored because of who was presenting them rather than what was being presented. The executive who called me too ignorant to speak isn't a bad person, she said, looking directly at Robert in the back of the room. He's just a victim of the same blind spots that are costing businesses billions of dollars every year. He couldn't see value in my perspective because he'd never learned to look for value in perspectives different from his own. The audience was completely engaged now, leaning forward in their seats, some taking notes, others nodding in recognition of their own blind spots. But here's the exciting part, Alicia continued, her voice growing stronger as she reached her conclusion. These aren't problems that require years of research or massive budget increases to solve. They require something much simpler and much more powerful. The humility to admit that we don't know everything and the wisdom to listen to voices we might have ignored before. She clicked to her final slide, which showed contact information for Hartley Consulting. The future of business belongs to companies that can truly understand and serve all of their customers, not just the ones who look like their leadership teams. If you're ready to unlock that potential, I'm ready to show you how. The applause was immediate and sustained, much more enthusiastic than the polite clapping she had received walking onto the stage. As she left the podium, Alicia could see people already pulling out their phones, probably to look up her website or share clips of her presentation on social media. But the moment that made everything worthwhile was seeing Robert's face as she walked past his section. He looked like a man who had just watched his carefully constructed world collapse in real time. The executives sitting with him were leaning over to ask questions, probably wondering why he had never mentioned his wife's obvious expertise. Victoria was waiting backstage with a huge smile and a glass of water. That was absolutely brilliant. You had them in the palm of your hand from the first sentence. How did it look from the audience? Like someone announcing the arrival of a major new player in the consulting world. My phone started buzzing with messages halfway through your presentation. You're going to have more potential clients than you know what to do with. As if to prove her point, a small crowd of conference attendees was already gathering near the stage exit, clearly hoping to speak with Alicia. She could see business cards being pulled out, phones being exchanged, the kind of networking frenzy that happened when someone delivered a presentation that actually mattered. Ms. Hartley? A woman in an expensive suit approached with an eager expression. I'm Catherine Wells from Meridian Retail. We've been struggling with exactly the issues you just described. Could we schedule a meeting to discuss how you might help us? Before Alicia could answer, another voice interrupted. Actually, she'll need to check her calendar. Ms. Hartley is going to be very busy in the coming weeks. They all turned to see Robert approaching, his smile sharp and his tone deceptively friendly. Alicia felt her muscles tense, but she kept her expression neutral. Robert, she said calmly, I didn't expect you to come backstage. Just wanted to congratulate my wife on her presentation. The way he said wife made it sound like a claim of ownership. Though I should probably clarify a few things for everyone here. Alicia could see what he was trying to do, undermine her credibility by reminding everyone that she was just a corporate wife playing at being a consultant. But she was ready for this. Of course, she said sweetly. Robert, meet Catherine Wells from Meridian Retail and... She gestured to the other potential clients who had gathered around. Actually, Robert said, his voice growing colder, I think people should know that the failed campaign Alicia mentioned in her presentation was based on proprietary Harrison Industries research. Research that she accessed inappropriately. The accusation hung in the air like a challenge. Alicia felt the attention of everyone around them shift, suddenly uncertain about what they were witnessing. You're absolutely right, Alicia said, her voice remaining perfectly calm. I did have access to Harrison Industries research. 8 years worth of it, actually, since I was the one who conducted most of it. All unpaid, of course, since I was just the helpful corporate wife. She pulled out her phone and showed the screen to the group. This is the email I sent to Robert's marketing department 6 months ago with my analysis of why their campaign strategy would fail. Would you like to see the response I received? Catherine Wells leaned in to read the screen and her eyebrows rose. They told you to stick to planning dinner parties? That's right. And when the campaign failed exactly as I predicted, costing the company over $2 million, I realized that maybe it was time to start my own firm where my research would be taken seriously. Robert's face was flushed now, his carefully constructed image crumbling in front of people whose opinions mattered to him. Alicia, this isn't the place. You're right, she interrupted. This isn't the place for you to try to diminish my professional credibility the way you've been diminishing me personally for years. These people came here to talk business, not to witness another one of your attempts to make me feel small. The group around them had grown larger, and Alicia could see phones being pulled out, probably recording what was becoming a very public confrontation. Robert seemed to realize he was losing control of the narrative. Ladies and gentlemen, he said, forcing his most charming smile, my wife is going through a difficult emotional period right now. I'm sure you understand that divorce proceedings can make people say things they don't really mean. It was his last card to play, painting her as an unstable woman making emotional accusations. Alicia almost felt sorry for him. He had no idea how thoroughly she had prepared for this moment. You're absolutely right that I'm going through a divorce, she said clearly. From a man who spent years convincing me I wasn't smart enough to contribute to business discussions, then tried to steal my ideas when they proved more valuable than his own. She turned to address the crowd directly. The research Robert just claimed was proprietary to Harrison Industries? It's all documented in emails I sent to the company over the past 2 years. Research they ignored, dismissed, and ultimately tried to copy, badly, after I left. Victoria appeared at Alicia's elbow, her expression pure steel. I believe everyone here has business to conduct. Robert, perhaps you should prepare for your own presentation. I understand it starts in 10 minutes. The dismissal was polite but unmistakable. Robert looked around at the faces surrounding him. Some curious, some disapproving, all now viewing him as the man who had tried to sabotage his own wife's professional debut. This isn't over, Alicia, he said quietly. You're right, she replied. It's just beginning. As Robert stalked away, the crowd around Alicia seemed to close ranks protectively. The business cards came out again, along with more questions about her services and availability. Ms. Hartley, Catherine Wells said with a smile, I think I speak for everyone here when I say that presentation was exactly what the business world needs to hear. When can we schedule that meeting? Looking around at the faces of people who saw her as a professional equal rather than a decorative accessory, Alicia felt the last pieces of her old life fall away. She wasn't Robert's wife anymore, or someone's daughter, or anyone's idea of who she should be. She was exactly who she had always been meant to be, and the business world was finally ready to listen. 6 months after walking out of Harrison Industries as the humiliated wife of an executive, Alicia stood in the conference room of her own consulting firm, looking out at a view that rivaled any corporate office in the city. Hartley Consulting had grown faster than even Victoria's most optimistic projections, and the corner office suite they now occupied was a testament to just how wrong Robert had been about her potential. The Meridian Retail contract is officially signed, her assistant Cameron announced, placing the documents on her desk with obvious satisfaction. That brings our year 1 revenue to just over $2 million. Alicia smiled as she reviewed the numbers. Catherine Wells had become not just a client but an advocate, referring 3 other major retailers who were struggling to connect with diverse customer bases. Each success had led to another, creating a snowball effect that had established Hartley Consulting as the premier firm for authentic market engagement. Any word from the Peterson Group about their decision? She asked. They want to move forward with the full analysis package. Apparently, your presentation last week convinced them that they'd been leaving money on the table for years. Cameron, a recent MBA graduate who had chosen to work for Alicia over several offers from established firms, was grinning. Oh, and there's something else you should see. He handed her a business magazine with her photo on the cover. The headline read, "The Consultant Who's Changing How America Does Business. Alicia Hartley's Rise from Corporate Wife to Industry Leader." Inside was a 5-page feature article detailing her story, from the boardroom humiliation that had sparked her transformation to the innovative methodologies that were revolutionizing how companies approach diverse markets. The article included testimonials from clients whose profits had increased dramatically after implementing her strategies. But the part that made Alicia smile was a small sidebar about Harrison Industries' struggles in the wake of her departure. Their marketing failures had continued, their stock price had dropped 15%, and they had recently hired and fired 3 different consulting firms trying to fix problems that Alicia could have solved in her sleep. "There's something else," Cameron said, his expression shifting to barely concealed excitement. Dr. Noble called. "The International Business Innovation Council wants to offer you their Rising Star Award at next month's conference. It's the most prestigious recognition for emerging business leaders." Alicia felt a flutter of pride mixed with disbelief. The same organization that had once dismissed her as a corporate wife was now recognizing her as one of the year's most influential new voices in business. Her phone buzzed with a text from Victoria. "Lunch? I have news you'll want to hear in person." An hour later, they sat in the same cafe where Victoria had first offered to mentor her, though now they were meeting as equals rather than mentor and student. Victoria's smile was particularly mysterious as she settled into her chair. "I assume you've seen the magazine cover?" Victoria said. "Hard to miss. Though I still can't quite believe it's real." "Believe it? And get ready for the offers to start pouring in. Harvard Business School wants you to speak at their Women's Leadership Conference. Goldman Sachs is interested in having you consult on their diversity initiatives. And," Victoria paused dramatically, "there's a publishing house that wants to discuss a book deal." "A book? About your methodology, your story, the whole journey from invisible wife to industry innovator. They think it could be huge, not just in business circles, but as a broader story about women finding their power." Alicia tried to process the magnitude of what Victoria was describing. 6 months ago, she had been grateful for scraps of attention from her husband. Now people wanted to study her methods and learn from her experience. "There's more," Victoria continued. "Remember that conference where you gave your breakthrough presentation? They want you to be the keynote speaker next year. The theme is Voices That Change Everything, and you're their top choice." "What about Robert? Harrison Industries has been a major sponsor for years." Victoria's smile turned sharp. "Not anymore. They withdrew their sponsorship last month. Apparently, they're having some financial difficulties." Before Alicia could ask for details, her phone rang. The caller ID showed Janet Morrison's name, which was unusual since they had moved beyond their initial contact to become genuine friends. "Alicia, are you sitting down?" Janet's voice was breathless with excitement. "Yes, why?" "Robert just got fired. The board voted him out this morning. Apparently, the marketing disasters were just the beginning. There's been some kind of financial irregularity with client accounts." Alicia felt a moment of genuine shock. She had expected Robert's career to suffer from his poor business decisions, but she hadn't imagined it would end this dramatically. "What kind of irregularities?" "Nobody's saying officially, but the rumors are that he was funneling company money into personal expenses. You know, those expensive client dinners that weren't actually with clients. The affairs." Robert's attempts to impress his girlfriends with company resources had finally caught up with him. Alicia felt a complex mix of emotions, satisfaction that justice had been served, but also a strange sadness for the man he could have been if he hadn't been so threatened by her success. "There's something else," Janet continued. "Amanda Rodriguez was fired too. Turns out she was involved in some of the fraudulent expenses. The board is considering criminal charges." After hanging up, Alicia sat quietly for a moment, processing the news. Victoria watched her with understanding eyes. "How do you feel about it?" Victoria asked gently. "Honestly, I feel sorry for him. Not because he didn't deserve consequences, but because he did this to himself. If he had supported my success instead of trying to sabotage it, if he had seen me as a partner instead of a threat, none of this would have happened." "That's very generous of you." "It's not generosity. It's just the truth. Robert's downfall wasn't caused by me succeeding, it was caused by his inability to handle anyone else's success. He was so busy trying to keep me small that he forgot to focus on his own work. Victoria nodded thoughtfully. And now? Alicia looked around the cafe where her new life had begun, then out at the city where she was building something that belonged entirely to her. Now I keep building. The awards are nice, the recognition is satisfying, but what matters is the work. Every client I help, every company that learns to see their customers more clearly, every woman who sees my story and realizes she doesn't have to accept someone else's definition of her worth, that's what this was all about. As they prepared to leave, Victoria placed a hand on Alicia's shoulder. You know, when I first met you, I saw potential that even you didn't recognize. But watching you now, I realize I underestimated you. You didn't just build a successful business. You became the person you were always meant to be. Walking back to her office, Alicia's phone buzzed with another call. This time it was an unknown number with a local area code. Miss Hartley? This is Dr. James Chin from the City University Business School. We have a proposition that might interest you. I'm listening. We'd like to offer you a position as a visiting professor, teaching a course on inclusive market strategies. The position would be part-time, allowing you to continue your consulting work, but we think your real-world experience would be invaluable to our students. Professor Alicia Hartley. The title had a nice ring to it. As she reached her building, Alicia caught her reflection in the lobby's polished surfaces. The woman looking back at her was confident, successful, and completely in control of her own destiny. She bore little resemblance to the insecure wife who had once been grateful for any scrap of attention from a man who couldn't see her worth. Her phone buzzed one more time, a text from an unknown number. For a moment, she wondered if it might be Robert, finally ready to apologize or ask for help. Instead, it was from a woman named Lisa Chin. Ms. Hartley, I saw your interview in Business Today. My husband says I'm not smart enough to understand his work, but your story gives me hope. Could we meet for coffee? I think I'm ready to find out who I really am. Alicia smiled as she typed back, I'd be honored to meet with you. And Lisa? You're already smarter than you know. You just need someone to help you remember. The elevator ride to her office gave her a moment to reflect on how completely her life had changed. 6 months ago, she had been invisible, dismissed, treated as an accessory to someone else's success. Now she was building something meaningful, helping other people find their voices, creating ripple effects that would extend far beyond her own story. The best revenge, she had learned, wasn't Robert's downfall, it was her own rise. Every success, every recognition, every life she touched proved that his assessment of her worth had been not just wrong, but spectacularly, catastrophically wrong. As the elevator doors opened onto her floor, Alicia Hartley stepped into her future with the confidence of someone who had not just survived being underestimated, but had transformed that underestimation into the foundation of something extraordinary. 1 year after her public debut at the business conference, Alicia stood backstage at the International Women's Leadership Summit, preparing to deliver the keynote address to an audience of 5,000 women leaders from around the world. The theme of her speech was From Invisible to Unstoppable, and as she looked out at the sea of faces waiting to hear her story, she felt the weight of responsibility that came with being a symbol of transformation. 5 minutes, Ms. Hartley, the stage manager announced. Alicia smoothed her burgundy power suit and checked her appearance one last time in the backstage mirror. The woman looking back at her was polished, confident, and completely comfortable in her own skin. It was hard to believe that just 18 months ago, she had been afraid to speak up in her own living room. Her phone buzzed with a series of encouraging messages. Victoria, you've got this. Knock them dead. Cameron, the office is watching on livestream. We're all so proud. Janet Morrison, about to watch the woman who changed my perspective on everything change 5,000 more lives. But the message that touched her most was from Lisa Chen, the woman who had reached out after reading Alicia's first magazine interview. Lisa had left her controlling husband 6 months ago and was now launching her own accounting firm with Alicia's mentorship. Watching you speak today. Thank you for showing me that being small was a choice, not a sentence. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome keynote speaker and founder of Hartley Consulting, Alicia Hartley. The applause was thunderous as Alicia walked onto the stage. 5,000 women rose to their feet, many of them holding up signs with quotes from her previous speeches or photos from her magazine covers. The energy in the auditorium was electric, charged with the collective power of women who had refused to accept limitations. 18 months ago, Alicia began, her voice carrying clearly through the vast space, I stood in a corporate boardroom while my husband told a room full of executives that I was too ignorant to speak about business. I believed him. Not just in that moment but for years leading up to it. I had accepted his assessment of my worth because it was easier than fighting for my right to be heard. The audience was already leaning forward, invested in her story despite having heard versions of it in interviews and articles. But here's what I didn't understand then. When someone tells you that you're too small, too ignorant, too unqualified to have a voice, they're not describing you. They're describing their own limitations. They're telling you exactly how threatened they are by your potential. For the next 30 minutes, Alicia walked the audience through her journey, not just the business success, but the internal transformation that had made it possible. She talked about learning to value her own insights, about building confidence through action rather than waiting for permission, about the difference between being liked and being respected. The most dangerous thing about accepting someone else's definition of your worth, she said, her voice growing stronger, is not that it limits what you can achieve. It's that it limits what you can imagine achieving. When I was told I was too ignorant to speak about business, I didn't just stop speaking. I stopped thinking. I stopped believing that my thoughts had value. She clicked to a slide showing the growth of Hartley Consulting, from 0 to 15 employees and over $5 million in annual revenue in just 18 months. This company exists because I finally understood that my perspective wasn't a limitation. It was an advantage. The fact that I had been dismissed and overlooked meant I understood exactly how millions of consumers felt when companies ignored their needs and preferences. The applause was interrupting her now, spontaneous bursts of recognition and appreciation from women who saw their own struggles reflected in her story. But I'm not here just to talk about business success, Alicia continued. I'm here to talk about something more fundamental, the right to take up space in the world. The right to have opinions, to voice them, to be wrong sometimes and still be worthy of respect. She paused, looking out at the sea of faces, thinking about all the women who were still trapped in situations like her old marriage, still believing they were lucky to be tolerated rather than valued. Some of you are sitting here today feeling like imposters. Like you don't belong in rooms where important decisions are made. Like your success is somehow temporary or undeserved. I want you to remember something. The people who told you that you weren't qualified, who made you feel small, who convinced you to be grateful for scraps of recognition. Where are they now? She clicked to her final slide, which showed a recent photo of her accepting an award from the President of the United States for her contributions to economic development. They're exactly where they always were, trying to keep other people small so they can feel big. But you're here. You're taking up space. You're using your voice. You're proving every day that their assessment of your worth was not just wrong, but irrelevant. The standing ovation began before she finished speaking and continued for several minutes. As Alicia looked out at the audience, women from every industry, every background, every level of success, she felt a profound sense of completion. Not because her journey was over, but because she had become exactly who she was always meant to be. Backstage, she was surrounded by conference organizers, media representatives, and other speakers who wanted to congratulate her. But the person she was most excited to see was Victoria, who had been watching from the VIP section with tears in her eyes. "I am so proud of you," Victoria said, embracing her tightly. "You've become everything I hoped you could be and more than I ever imagined possible." "I couldn't have done any of this without you," Alicia replied. "You saw something in me that I couldn't see in myself." "No," Victoria shook her head. "I saw something that was already there. I just helped you remember it." As they made their way to the reception, Alicia's phone rang with a call from an international number. She almost ignored it, but something made her answer. "Miss Hartley? This is Dr. Elizabeth Okafor from the Global Economic Development Council. We have a proposition that might interest you." "I'm listening." "We're launching an initiative to help women entrepreneurs in developing countries access mentorship and funding. Based on your work here and your reputation for understanding underserved markets, we'd like you to consider leading the program. It would involve travel, international speaking engagements, and the opportunity to impact thousands of women's lives." Alicia felt her heart race with excitement. It was exactly the kind of challenge that would have terrified her old self and thrilled her new one. "When do we start?" she asked. 2 hours later, at the summit's closing reception, Alicia found herself in conversation with women from dozens of countries, all sharing stories of their own transformations and challenges. The common thread was clear. Everywhere, women were fighting to be heard, to be valued, to be taken seriously in rooms where their voices had been systematically excluded. "Miss Hartley?" A young woman approached hesitantly. "I'm sorry to interrupt, but I wanted to thank you. I'm getting divorced from a man who sounds a lot like your ex-husband. Your story gave me the courage to leave." Before Alicia could respond, another woman joined them. Same here. I started my own business after reading about your company. My husband said I was crazy, but we're profitable now and growing every month. Soon, Alicia was surrounded by women sharing their own stories of transformation, of finding their voices, of refusing to accept other people's limitations. Each story was different, but they all shared the same theme: the decision to stop being small. As the evening wound down, Alicia stepped out onto the hotel's terrace, looking out at the city lights and reflecting on how completely her life had changed. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number, and for a moment she wondered if it might be Robert. They hadn't spoken since their confrontation at the conference, though she had heard through mutual acquaintances that he was working as a mid-level consultant for a small firm, having burned most of his bridges in the industry. Instead, the text was from someone she didn't recognize. Ms. Hartley, I watched your speech online tonight. My wife has been talking about starting her own business, but I've been discouraging her because I don't think she understands how difficult it would be. After hearing your story, I realize I might be wrong. Could you recommend someone who could help her develop her ideas? Dr. Michael Torres. Alicia smiled as she typed back, Dr. Torres, I'd be happy to speak with your wife directly. Sometimes the best person to evaluate someone's business potential is the person with the ideas, not the person married to them. As she put her phone away, Alicia caught her reflection in the terrace's glass doors. The woman looking back at her was successful, respected, and completely in control of her own destiny. More importantly, she was someone who used her success to lift other women up rather than keeping them down. The elevator ride to her suite gave her a moment to process everything that had happened. In 18 months, she had gone from invisible corporate wife to internationally recognized business leader. She had built a company, written a book proposal, accepted speaking engagements around the world, and was about to launch a global initiative to help women entrepreneurs. But perhaps most importantly, she had become living proof that the people who try to make you feel small are usually the ones who are most threatened by your potential to be large. Her suite sitting room had a stunning view of the city, and as Alicia poured herself a glass of wine and settled into the comfortable armchair by the window, she allowed herself to really appreciate how far she had come. Not just professionally but personally. She was no longer someone who needed external validation to feel worthy. She was no longer someone who apologized for taking up space or having opinions. She was Alicia Hartley, and she was exactly who she was meant to be. Her phone rang one more time, Victoria's number. I just wanted to tell you again how incredible you were tonight, Victoria said. But more than that, I wanted to thank you. Thank me? For what? For proving that my faith in you was justified. For becoming the woman I saw in that cafe 18 months ago. For showing other women what's possible when someone refuses to stay small. Victoria's voice was warm with pride. You've built something beautiful, Alicia. Not just the business but the life. The person you've become. After they hung up, Alicia sat in the quiet luxury of her suite, sipping wine and watching the city sparkle below. Tomorrow she would fly home to her company, her team, her carefully built life. Next month, she would embark on the international program that could impact thousands of women's lives. But tonight, she was content to simply exist in the space she had claimed for herself, no longer invisible, no longer diminished, no longer afraid to be exactly as large as her dreams demanded. The woman who had once been called too ignorant to speak, had found her voice. And the world was finally listening.